Again, it is so good to see your faces and so comforting. You know, I grew up in the United Methodist Church, but I found my way to Judaism as an adult, and I have spent much of my adulthood studying Hebrew scripture. In seminary, I learned to read Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, and to read biblical Greek. That's not to say that I can speak either language, and please don't test me, because I still need a dictionary by my side as I do so. The title of today's sermon, Justice, Justice Shalt Thou Pursue, comes from the King James Version of Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 18 to 20. That's the version of the Bible that I grew up with. And at this point in the biblical narrative, Moses, who's been traveling with the Israelites through the desert and the wildlands for almost 40 years, is truly ready to have them settle down in their promised land. According to the scriptural story, he is really pulling his hair out and he's done. He is ready for his people to find their place in the world and to settle there. But before God will open the land for Israel's inhabitation, God insists that Moses provide the Israelites with a social contract, with a covenant, if you will. One that is meant to assure them a long life of peace and prosperity in their new land. So there are a lot of thou shalls and thou shalt nots. Here at this point, Moses is teaching the Israelites about how to establish a court system. As recounted in the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, Moses tells them the following: "You shall appoint judges and officials throughout your tribes, in all your towns, and they shall render just decisions for the people. You must not distort justice. You must not show partiality. You must not accept bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the wise and subvert the cause of those who are in the right. Justice, justice shall you pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord God is giving you." Our current justice system is built on these same principles. This admonition to pursue justice and not distort it with partiality and bribes resonated with me at a very young age. I was always the first to cry foul when someone I knew was unjustly accused of something, or being made fun of, or being abused in some way, or simply being ignored when they had something to say. No one was surprised when I became a lawyer. And as a lawyer, I was committed to fairness and justice for my clients within the rules of the legal system in which I was operating. For over 25 years, I was guided by the command to pursue justice, and I found fulfillment and satisfaction in representing my clients in our legal system. Eventually, however, I became aware that our justice system isn't always as just as one might think, and that a one-rule-fits-all system often leaves out those who do not have the means, the background, or the opportunities of those for whom the rules were made. The underlying assumptions were often just wrong. During my time living as a modern Orthodox Jewish woman, I discovered that what English translates as justice in the Bible is really two different concepts in Hebrew, two different words. The first concept is the Hebrew word mishpat, which refers to what we understand as a legal justice system. It also refers to respect of people's rights. It is a more formal and rules-oriented justice that speaks of punishment being equal to the crime. It is the basis of our judicial system. But mishpat is not the Hebrew word used in this passage. The Hebrew word used here is tzedakah. Tzedakah is also a form of justice. It refers, however, to the day-to-day living in which a person conducts all relationships in family and society with fairness, generosity, and equity. This idea of justice is roughly equivalent to our first and second principles. Our commitment to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person and to act with justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. This theme of tzedakah is one of the constants in my life. As a child, I was particularly concerned about fairness. As I said, I was one to speak out against what I experienced as an unfair educational system that insisted on blind adherence to rules over accommodating the real circumstances of the children in my classes. My natural tendency to advocate for myself and others continued into my teenage years. I wrote impassioned letters to the editor of my small town newspaper. Some of which were not appreciated by the adults who read them. For I was calling out the unfairness of school policies, particularly those that allowed teachers to disregard the educational needs of the students and simply pass them on to the next grade. I was also very active in the United Methodist Church that I grew up in. I led the youth group, I preached on youth Sundays, and attended events in Washington, D.C. and New York City designed to expose me to the social justice work of the church. Although I was grateful for these experiences, I began to rebel against having to recite a creed, much of which I no longer believed. I also wanted more practical instruction than love your neighbor as yourself gave me for what love looks like in the real world. And as many young people do, I experienced a real cognitive dissonance when I watched the elders in the church say one thing when in the church, but act differently when they were in the community. So, like many college-age students, disenchanted with the hypocrisy I found in my small local church, I made the common mistake of overgeneralizing my limited experience to all of Christendom. I didn't attend any church or any other religious organization while I was getting my English degree at William & Mary. But I continued to be concerned about fairness. As president of the student government, I lobbied the Virginia General Assembly and organized several student protests over budgetary decisions that were overfunding certain revenue-generating programs, let's say like football, basketball, and underfunding and even proposing the elimination of some of the non-revenue sports like archery and swimming, riflery. These were sports where we actually had some Olympic contenders, but because they didn't generate funds, they were being considered for elimination. My efforts, along with those of my classmates, were successful in obtaining a 5-year moratorium on making any cuts to the targeted programs. We demonstrated, we attended board of visitor meetings, and we actually put together a plan where the students would be involved in a student-run fundraiser, and we would agree to a reallocation of some of the student fees. That's where I understood that I didn't have to do these things by myself, but that the power of group organization and group work could actually make a difference in the world. Although I had originally intended to be a high school English teacher, it was no surprise to anyone that I made the last-minute decision to continue my education at the University of Virginia Law School. By that time, I was hungering for a community that could help me understand how to make meaning of my life. And I found just such a community among my Jewish friends. I began studying Judaism, First, just out of intellectual curiosity, and then as part of my conversion process, which led to my living over 10 years as a modern Orthodox Jewish woman in Stamford, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., and Richmond, Virginia. Among my Jewish friends, I found an understanding that anything I do, including the mundane tasks of living, with the intention of connecting to the divine presence, could be elevated to the realm of the spiritual and could be an expression of love in the world. I learned to keep kosher and to observe the Sabbath. I also learned that prayer is not just what I do before I go to bed or eat a meal. It is the way I live my life on a daily basis. I studied Judaism and Jewish ethics from several rabbis who impressed upon me that they were less concerned about what I believed and far more concerned with my action in the world. What was I doing to help repair the world and to help bring more justice, more tzedakah into the world? In answer to their question, I tried to do my part for 25 fulfilling years as an attorney dedicated to righting the wrongs done to my clients. First at the U.S. Department of Justice, then in several private businesses, and finally as a solo practitioner representing small businesses and people experiencing the dissolution of their family through divorce. I also represented children as a guardian ad litem in the court system. I also focused on nonprofits in my area, those that were participating and serving the community in various ways. And of course, when the time came, I dedicated myself to raising a healthy, well-adjusted, and spiritually aware child. My daughter Lucy has finished her first year at the University of Virginia and is at this moment in Lyon, France, attending a language immersion program there. Otherwise, she would be here with us today. And I have to say that it is one of the most fulfilling things I have ever done, and I cannot take full credit for it. I truly believe our children come into the world with their own moral centers and their own personalities, and it is for us to support them in their journey. Of all the ways in which I tried to make a difference, as I said, raising Lucy has been one of the most rewarding, which eventually I had to do as a single parent when her father and I divorced. That's when Lucy and I moved back to my hometown of Whitestone, Virginia, a tiny little town, surrounded by water. This area feels so comfortable to me. The river, the green, lush green forests. There, we enjoyed the love, support, and camaraderie of our extended family. Unfortunately, there are no public places of worship there for Jews, so out of necessity, my journey moved on, and I lived out my belief that the divine presence can be found anywhere, and spent time with various denominations before I discovered that a group of people had joined together to create a Unitarian Universalist fellowship. There, in my tiny, small town. I couldn't believe it. It was while practicing family law there in my small town and attending the fellowship that I began to realize that any fair system of rules or laws needs a certain amount of mercy, a recognition that all people are not always similarly situated, and that sometimes people simply make mistakes. I began to feel that there was just too much mishpat, the rules-oriented justice, and not enough tzedakah, the compassionate form of justice. I also began to discern a deeper problem, a deeper pain that the justice system just could not address. I found that many of my clients were socially isolated, far from their families of origin, and without a value-based community to support them. That's when I began to think about becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. Within Unitarian Universalists, I found people with a plan of action, taking practical steps to bring justice into the world. People who were bound in community, not by a common creed, but a common set of principles and a common desire to embody what I understand as tzedakah. Here in the Unitarian Universalist Church, I have found a home, and I envy those of you who have grown up in it. I am grateful that you have stood fast against the tide of injustice and have stubbornly and joyfully stood up to those who say, we can't make a difference. Sometimes, I have to confess, I do feel like the mature man in our story. Not so mature, but so overwhelmed. I sometimes see that there is just so much in the world that I wish were otherwise. I wish were more gentle and more kind and more compassionate and more fair. I sometimes feel as though I am just trying to continue one foot before the other on my designated path. But then, I find someone like the children in our story, so compassionate, so hopeful, so kind, and so full of energy. And I am reminded that I do not have to do this work alone. Based on my spiritual journey thus far, I have in mind a different ending to our story. An ending that reflects the commitment and community I see here at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the whole Hudson Valley. I love that. You got me. My ending would reflect my experience that our efforts are multiplied when we join with other like-minded people. My ending would reflect my belief in the power of people working together in the type of justice embodied in the Hebrew word tzedakah. I want this story to end something like this. And after their conversation, the man recognized the truth in what the little children had said. They were making a difference for each of the starfish that they were returning to the water. He began to help them, throwing in as many starfish as he could. After a little while, the man once again considered what a big job it was that he and the little children had undertaken. He realized that they could save many more starfish if they had more hands to help. So he told the little children that he would stay on the beach, continuing the work that they had started, while they ran to tell their parents, their siblings, their friends, and neighbors about the plight of the starfish, and asked them to come down to the beach and help. Before long, the man was joined by dozens and dozens of people, all ages, and hundreds, if not thousands, of starfish were saved that day. The people who had gathered there on the beach wondered how many other times the starfish had been stranded there when there had been no one around to help them. So right then and there, they made the commitment to come together after each big storm to return as many stranded starfish to the sea as they could. Now, you wonder why we have starfish.
This one.
All right. Well, I ask you to consider the perspective of the starfish, who must have been grateful for the people who realized their plight and saved them from certain death. In each of our lives, there is someone who has been there for us when we needed them most. Sometimes doing extraordinary things. It could be a parent, a sibling, a family member, a friend, or a teacher, a mentor, a boss, or a coworker. Anyone. I invite you to take some time now and consider who that is for you. Once you know, then please put your name on one side of your starfish and the name of the person who has come to mind on the other side of the starfish.
So sorry to interrupt. We have so many wonderful people here. We've run out of starfish. Yes, last week I brought on the starfish from the sea.
Oh, some have extra here.
think we need about 15 or 20, I don't know. Otherwise, we could probably,
Yes,
and then we'll,
if somebody wanted to write on the starfish, that would be fine.
There's still starfish on the
Yes, for our class. Boy, this is what a friend of mine taught me to understand as a nice problem to have. Not enough starfish. Okay. Thank you all for your enthusiasm. So I invite you to take some time now and consider who that person is for you. Now this is a private exercise, but we are going to share in the fellowship hall publicly. So you can write your name, your whole name. We'd like to know you are participating. On the back, you can write the name of the person that comes to mind, or their initials, or draw a doodle, or a little picture, something that evokes for you that person in your life. Okay, now here's the hard part. Just hold on to them. And I'll tell you at the end of our service what we'd like you to do.
Before Jack performs for you today, there was a misprint. Mariah Carey did not co-write